All right. Hi, everyone. We are at noon Central Standard Time. So I am going to get started here. We have Sarah with us who's going to talk about the art of precepting and just empowering our interns. Um, well, you can probably see, I'm going to actually let you introduce yourself, Sarah, because I don't want to switch screens since I'm actually recording
Oh, yeah.
on my end. So I'll just hand it over to you, Sarah, and let you introduce yourself.
Okay. All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Sarah Kozik. I've been a dietitian since 2008, and I've actually been a preceptor since 2009. And I'm also an adjunct professor at Viterbo. So it's kind of nice. I have both ends of the story where I teach the students, I hear their stories, and then I also intern with the students and see their progress. So it's kind of a nice little collaboration balance thing. And just a little bit about a background about myself. I have a company, Miha, and I also have my practice, Sarah Kozik, and I consult with different corporations. My Miha company is a wellness company where we make supplements and products and product development for wellness. And then with Sarah Kozik, I do a lot of consultation, for example, with Apple, Clover Sonoma, and other companies and corporations. And then I do a little bit of writing and a lot of precepting with other universities too throughout the most of the United States and a lot of virtual stuff also. So yeah, so that's a little bit about me. And today we will be discussing, oops, wait. Okay, there. Let me admit these. Okay. So, some of the learning objectives we'll be doing is just really getting an idea of what precepting is and what it entails. And we'll definitely talk about ways to inspire our interns and grow with our interns. And then we'll talk about challenging situations because that does arise and effective ways to resolve those situations and how to move forward and how to keep progressing and growing. So, that's kind of what we will do today. And let's get started. So, basically, Precepting 101. So, we are here to provide real world competency development. We're here to really help our students transition from being a student to a professional. We are basically strengthening the future of dietetics. And like you are, as preceptors, you are all so valuable and you're really helping our industry grow. And precepting is definitely multifaceted. At times we'll be teaching, we'll be evaluating, we'll be coaching. So the art of know is like knowing what role to do and when at the moment. And precepting is not expected to be like a full-time instructor, know everything, but instead it's more of like a guide, like for the students. So because we want to help them apply what they've learned in school in the classroom into the real life practice. In fact, just yesterday, I had an intern telling me, gosh, I wish I was better prepared because I feel like I'm just so school educated, but not real world educated. Since my practice is a little, we were doing a little bit more communication with the general public versus she's more used to book communication, like writing papers and things like that. So it was a little different type of writing style. And so that's kind of an example is like bringing that real world experience. And then, as being a different types of teachers, coaches, mentors, role models, like, as a supervisor, will be overseeing tasks and performance from the students. As a teacher, will be like transferring our knowledge and our skills to them. And then as a mentor, will be guiding their professional growth and identity. And we're not expected to know all the answers. We're not expected to solve their weak or fix every weakness necessarily. And it's not all on us for the students' sole success. Like it's a collaboration. And it's a shared responsibility between ourselves as the preceptors and the students and the academic program. So, once again, we really want to also highlight that we're in this together. And so, we're here to really work together as a team to enhance the interns' learning and growth. Okay, so we've got some myths. Number one is we do not need to know everything. Um, in fact, it's about really having resources. I mean, I know that even in my practice, well, I know, right? I know everything now. In my practice, I don't know everything. There's so many times that things arise where clients will ask me a question, and I'm like, that's a great question. I will get that. I will send you that information after during the follow-up. So it's like we don't always need to know everything. And that same goes for preceptors. And then another myth is that we need years of experience. So I mentioned that I became a dietitian in 2008. So I passed the RD exam in November of '08, and I was precepting by January of '09. And experience doesn't always equal effectiveness. And yes, I get it. I've been doing this for a while now. I don't want to add up the time frame. I'm age and young forever, right? No, but yes, the more experience we have, ideally, the more we grow and know. But we don't necessarily need years of experience to be an effective preceptor. It's not about longevity, it's about the type and quality of preceptors that we are. Just kind of demonstrating curiosity, reflection, which we'll talk about in a few slides, communication, and also transferable skills. A lot of my interns will ask me, oh, I'm nervous about my job after I graduate because they all say 2 years minimum experience or 5 years minimum experience. And I have none. I just graduated. How do I get a job? And it's about transferable skills. I mean, we've had jobs in the past, possibly. What skill sets can we take from those previous experiences and bring them into this current experience? And the same thing goes for our precepting. Even if we've never precepted before, we can take past experiences and transferable skills into this position and utilize them. So it's really about that concept. And then let's see here. Okay. Oh, yes. Good interns don't need much guidance. Yes, I love it's always nice having an intern that's very self-motivated, independent, and really takes this initiative. But however, they do like guidance. And, we learn from structure, we learn from feedback, we learn from coaching, and the interns are here to learn and grow. And so it is nice to provide the feedback, which we will also talk about in a few slides. Okay, you should handle problems on your own. Remember, I said this is a collaboration, it's a partnership with the academic program. None of us are alone. We're here to work with you and to kind of share this experience and enhance the intern's growth and development. It will help everyone's thrive. So, once again, as preceptors, we're not alone. We do have the support from the academic program, the director, the instructors, everyone. Okay, so let's talk about traits of a preceptor. So it definitely goes down to effective communication skills. And this actually really relates to all of our lives, jobs, family, everything. Communication is optimal and it's really important to kind of set the stage. And before we think about this trait, I kind of just want you to pause and think about that. If there was a trait that your favorite preceptor might have had in your past, if for those of you that have done a dietetic or rotation or internship, like were there any traits that you took with you? I remember one of a bunch of my preceptors, they had an open door policy and they were always open to for me asking questions. And I asked a lot of questions because I was very curious and they provided feedback and stuff. And so kind of thinking about those traits, I really valued that open door policy. And so in my practice now, I still try to do that. So that's just kind of one of my favorite preceptor moments. But yeah, so with that in mind, the communication things. So I highly recommend on the very first day having an orientation and sitting down with the intern, kind of like when we start a new job. We have an orientation with our boss supervisor. We sit down, we understand what the expectations are, what our the site is about, what our roles are. And with in regards to the intern, they can learn about, the site that you are doing. You guys can talk about objectives, competencies, see what projects that you have in mind to do and how the projects align with the competencies that the intern needs to complete. And if there are competencies that can't be met, if there a way to meet them, or et cetera, et cetera. So just really having that orientation, clear expectation from day one can be really important and powerful. And also, too, some things that I like to do is I also like to talk about learning styles and preferences. And once again, you all can do your own practice with your own precepting style. One thing that for my practice, since it's more virtual, I'll tell the student different projects that I have in mind, and then I'll ask them of these projects, which ones excite you the most. Or which ones are you interested in moving forward with? So we can do those specific projects, and it's nice for them because they might be more excited or motivated to do them. And then I also sometimes ask about learning styles, especially depending on your site, whether you're in person or virtual. How does that setting help with that person's learning style? We all do learn differently. And so it's like, if it's virtual, what about time management? What about, support? Is there a way to share resources? So if it's on site, what works best with you? Is it hands-on, visual, audio, that kind of thing? So kind of also talking about learning styles can help too on day one. And then ethical practice, being competent, as dietitians and any type of preceptor we are, definitely we always want to put our ethics in. I remember my dad said, Sarah, two words get you by in life: be kind and professional. Kindness, professionalism. And to this day, I do my best to practice it. And I just feel like it's the golden rule, and it will get you by in life. And then the growth mindset. So Carol Dweck, she coined the term growth mindset, and it's basically the belief that um, abilities and intelligence, they aren't fixed, but they can be developed over time, hard work, dedication, and basically we learn from our challenges and our quote unquote failures. And the growth mindset really fosters resilience. Like when something doesn't go as planned, like what do we learn from it, or how do we keep moving forward? And it kind of helps with that sense of greater achievement. And people with the growth mindset just really value challenges. They persist through setbacks. They see effort kind of as a path to quote unquote mastery, and it's just a fun learning experience. And it has actually, a lot of schools now are having their principals and teachers read the book, and it's just it's basically shown that better outcomes can happen with academics, career life, etc., when we have this mentality of resilience and fostering learning. And then the kind of the patience and approachability. Yes. Just the other day, I was talking about patience is a virtue, and it is so true. And everyone learns at a different pace. And then we just need to accommodate and work with those different learning levels and styles. I've definitely had some interns come in that have been on different levels, and some of them are like, do you, do you even know Nutrition 101? I'm thinking this in my head. And I just have to I meet them where they're at, and then we just do our best to find progress and growth. And sometimes it takes patience. Not everyone learns at they have different paces. And so sometimes having that open door policy where you're open to feedback, and just like we expect our interns to be open to feedback, we can be open to feedback too. So that can help too. And then yeah, so that kind of jumps into the willingness to give feedback. And I always tell my interns there's no bad question. The bad question is the one that wasn't asked. So definitely kind of that approachability, that openness where they can, you know, ask questions, gain more clarity, because the better that they understand, we can also understand, and it's easier to learn. And when we do give feedback in a constructive way, it can also encourage that growth. And it's all about kind of how we frame our words. And I'll talk about this later in another slide, but definitely the feedback is important too. Okay. And then ways to inspire. So I also now want to take a moment to just think about that preceptor or boss that really, or mentor, coach, whoever it was that inspired us. What did they do that was so inspiring? What did they say? What did they say to you? Or how did they act? And reflecting on this with my internship. So I did my internship in San Francisco at the San Francisco General Hospital, which is now called Mark Zuckerberg. And I had two preceptors that just really still remain with me today. One of them was Kelly Toth, and she was the dietitian in the NICU. And I was so scared in the NICU. I was excited to be there because I love math and the little babies, but I was so scared because, these, oh my goodness, so tiny, and any mistake, I didn't want to do anything detrimental. And so there was a big, like, anxiety level, lack of confidence, and just nervousness. And I remember asking Kelly a bunch of questions, and she was like, you know what, Sarah? I don't know the answer, but I know where to find it. And I was blown away because I was like, Kelly, aren't you supposed to know everything? It was great in that sense where to this day, it helped me gain my confidence because she showed me the resources, she showed me where to go. And it made me realize that we don't know everything. And every day is a learning experience. And to this day, I've been, practicing since 2000, well, almost 2009, end of 2008. I'm still learning and growing. There's still so much more information coming out, new studies, new research. And I don't know all the answers, and that's okay, because I know where to find them, and I know where to go, and I know the trusted resources, and I know how to read the research and whatnot. So kind of just reminding us about that, that really inspired me, and that helped build my confidence. And then also too, I just want to give another example. So another dietitian in the ICU, Jamie Blatz, she was another inspiration to me, and she inspired me about building relationships. So I'm in the ICU, and I'm thinking to myself, at this hospital that I interned at, we had to request, if we wanted to get a multivitamin, we had to ask the doctor for it. And as a young intern, I'm thinking to myself, why don't dietitians have the right to even just order a multivitamin? Why do we have to ask the doctors? What's wrong with this hierarchy? And I'm thinking to myself, why can't we have better empowerment? Blah, blah, blah. This little cocky little kid, right? And Jamie, she turns to me and she's like, Sarah, I get it, but let me tell you. Number one, there could be a contraindication or reaction if there's a particular disease state, and a multivitamin might have too much of one nutrient. And number two, at this hospital, everything falls on the shoulders of the doctor. So technically, the doctor has to sign off on everything because if something happens, it ultimately lands on them. And I'm like, oh, okay. And it just helped me build awareness. And she's like, so you know what, Sarah, you know what I do? I agree with you. I do like empowered dietitians, and I hear you. But what I've done is I've built relationships with people on the ICU. Like, she's built relationships with the doctors. She built relationships with the nurses, with the PT, with the OT, everyone. And so a lot of times when she would make recommendations, they technically had to sign off on it, but they didn't even look at the chart notes. They just said, okay, Jamie. quick, done. You're golden. We got you. And so that inspired me because it made me realize how valuable building relationships are. And so, it's like kind of like that inspiration. And jumping into that, like when we model passion and professionalism, like when we have passion, like Kelly and Jamie, the interns see it. I saw it. I saw how much they love their jobs, and like I saw how professional they were, and that also inspired me to kind of want to grow and do things. My dad says kindness, professional, that's it. And then demonstrating compassion and integrity. So, when we are authentically role modeling, when we're demonstrating our compassion, we're also demonstrating to the interns like what's valuable and how to be. And they see it and they definitely want to kind of it does inspire us. Think about when people are like gung ho about stuff, it really it helps. And then building confidence through feedback. We kind of briefly spoke in the other slide, but I wanted to get more into it. Constructive feedback, number one is we start with strengths. So we talk about the strengths of the intern, and then we describe the behavior, not the personality. So it's like more of the action concept and being clear and kind with the words, and then collaborating with the intern on improvement steps or where to take it from there. And that can really help encourage that ongoing process and progress. And with feedback, I definitely recommend doing feedback consistently throughout the rotation because if we wait until those evaluations, like the midpoints or the finals, we might be missing areas of growth or improvement. So, providing feedback consistently is great. One thing was nice during my internship is I remember having lunch with the preceptors. Then during the lunchtime, we would talk about things and daily. And then now I do a lot more virtual rotations. So unfortunately, I don't have the opportunity to have lunch with my interns, but I will do a coffee break with them and where we'll just catch up and chit chat about the projects and things like that. So it is nice to have that that feedback and really harbor. Okay. And then connecting daily tasks to meaningful and relevant outcomes. So this is actually important because, think about it. In our jobs, when we first started working there, we had the orientation. They talked about the organization as a whole. And we understand our purpose of being there and like the bigger picture. So it's like if we're doing tasks for specific projects, sometimes it helps to see the end goal in order to understand how impactful the contribution can be. So it's not just like, oh, let me do a handout for diabetes. We can talk about, well, this handout is going to go to these people and this is how it can help them, et cetera, et cetera. So kind of like understanding the whole big picture. And that can also inspire growth. It can encourage hard work and it could also encourage better deliverables too, when they see like the meaningness from it. And then creating a supportive, curious learning environment. So we definitely want to, be safe, advocate that, normalize questions and mistakes, encourage curiosity and critical thinking, and then of course model professionalism and respect, and then the promote of course the psychological safety of our interns. And students do learn best, excuse me, when they feel safe to ask questions and when we can admit uncertainties, because like I said, it's about progress, not perfection. We're here to grow, and we can share that mistakes are learning opportunities, and ultimately we want to make sure that our patients are safe, the safety of the patients is maintained, and the safety of our facility is maintained, depending on where we're working. So, by kind of like doing that supportive environment can also help support everyone's well-being. And then let's see here. Oh, sharing real career stories. So I've shared a few career stories with you, and it's okay to share some stories, and you also can set boundaries. we don't have to necessarily share personal things to a certain extent. But if you feel comfortable sharing some of your career paths, that can always be inspiring too, because it is nice to hear where people started and how they got there, or any kind of stories that you might feel are relevant to the situation. But definitely keep boundaries. But just kind of sometimes sharing that can help inspire others. Okay, so let's talk about some of these challenging situations. And yes, I've definitely had my fair share of interns that are, I, some are definitely more challenging than others, and we work with them, right? Unprepared interns. So, just recently I had an intern come in that was very I might have mentioned it earlier. It was I was kind of alarmed at how even like little background nutrition knowledge they had, like nutrition 101. It was very interesting. And so I was like, okay, what can we do about this situation? They're I wanted to meet them where they're at, and we kind of just talked about learning, like turning that challenge into a learning situation, like more like growth focused framing, strengths and improvements, like reflection, accountability, that kind of thing. So, just kind of talking more about like where they were at and where they particularly wanted to go. And so, setting up that clear communication, like when I mentioned earlier, like sitting down at the beginning, going through or the kind of the orientation, and just establishing, like figuring out where are you at right now? Um, what projects sound interesting to you? And then once we laid out one of the projects, kind of going step by step through it. So just, really breaking it down and figuring out like a clear plan and progress, and setting up achievable time frames, and asking them, okay, if your goal is to do this one task, how long do you think it might take you to do, and what is your process of doing it? So letting them kind of help you, letting them tell you what's going to happen at the same time, but guiding them. So that could sometimes, if they're unprepared, we can really just kind of set up almost like, a syllabus kind of course of action concept. And then overconfident interns. Well, remember this little intern that came in going, "Where's my multivitamin?" Right, not that I wouldn't call myself overconfident. I was just more of an advocate for our industry. But and that's when we can talk about, like, Jamie, she was great. She was non-judgmental, and she laughed at me in a very positive way. And she's like, Sarah, I get you. It's about building relationships. And so, just kind of sitting down with the interns and letting them know where we're at, what we're doing, and how we can move forward. So yes, that could be something with the overconfident interns, is just, talking about the policies and things like that. And then low confidence anxious interns. For those of you that are preceptors in clinical settings, hands down, a lot of interns have a lot more anxiety over the clinical rotations, just because of how much they're learning, and how rapid paced it is. And this is where, kind of like, I remember with Kelly, how she showed me, you don't have to know everything. It's okay. But it's great to have resources and figure things out on how to find it. And just actually, yesterday, I was talking to another preceptor. We had a meeting, a one-on-one, and the preceptor was like, she is in the clinical setting, and she's like, I gave our intern, I let her borrow our drug or medication interaction little book, and also to the NCP, nutrition care manual. And I'm like, yeah, great. We also have a link to those too, with Viterbo. And I'm like, this is brilliant. Thank you for sharing that, because now, when it's low confidence or anxiety, if they have the resources, it can just kind of help them grow. And just remembering that every day is a learning opportunity and we can learn and grow from that. And then if we have an intern that's defensive to feedback, so, sometimes, yeah, sometimes we might have an intern and we provide feedback and they kind of look at us like, what are you saying to me? Or 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 we're talking about areas that we can maybe move towards and for progress, and they might be giving excuses or saying things like not realizing, thinking that they're doing everything quote unquote the right way and not understanding how maybe this other way might be more conducive, et cetera, et cetera. So just defensiveness. And that's kind of like even in counseling, that rolling with resistance concept. Um, so how do we work with clients that are rolling like with resistance and resistant to um, what we're talking about? And this is where we can maybe consider our approach. Like, am I coming on too strong? Is there a way to modify my communication to help them out? Or is there a way for me to provide constructive feedback? What will help the intern learn? And so it's kind of like if someone is defensive to feedback, how do we roll with resistance? How do we, you know, ask questions, remain curious, remain patient, and, figure out a solution to that area? And then professional concerns. Okay, sometimes stuff just happens. I was talking to another professor, a fellow colleague, just earlier about a student that is not delivering their assignments on time, and that could be quote unquote a professional concern. And what do I do? And this is where we want to remind you that precepting, it's a partnership with the academic program. You're not alone. And, obviously we'll try to communicate directly with the intern first. And then if that's not working, reach out to us, reach out to the director, the professor. We're here to work together to find a resolution. And so sometimes there are professional concerns. The student isn't showing up, they're late, they're not delivering. They're maybe not even dressed appropriately, or they're not adhering to guidelines, whatever it might be. Just remember it is a collaboration. So we start with communicating directly, and then if there's still challenges, just know you can reach out and ask for assistance or guidance, or a meeting, because we're all here to help, and we ultimately want the students to thrive and grow. And so the whole point is to figure out solutions to these situations. And then, so some effective approaches to these difficult situations is, one is we want to stay objective. We want to kind of make sure that we're clear, like we're focusing on the object and observable behaviors versus the emotional factor. And we want to emphasize that, that a quote unquote difficult intern, it just really reflects more of like unmet expectations. There might be skill gaps, there might be anxiety, or there might even be that lack of confidence rather than poor motivation necessarily. So the goal isn't to label the intern, but to really understand what is getting in the way of success. And when we clarify expectations and competencies early on, like when we have that orientation, when we really kind of set the stage, we can establish the protocols, establish the expectations, establish the projects. So hopefully we can help mitigate any challenging situations. And then addressing concerns promptly. This is where we, as I mentioned earlier, we don't necessarily want to wait until the midpoint evaluation or the final evaluation. Like we kind of want to give feedback throughout the rotation. And if there is a concern, sorry, like a little fruit fly buzzing around me. If there is a concern, if challenges arise, like bring it up right away. It's kind of like in our personal relationships, like you know, we don't want to just sideswipe everything if there's an elephant in the room, and sometimes we just gotta deal with uncomfortable situations, and that's okay because it we don't want it to fester and continue with the pattern. Um, for example, a concern. So I had this one intern, and I do some food photography, and we she did a recipe and she submitted the work, and it was very subpar. And I was like, okay, we need to address this. And so I sat down with her and I first gave her positive feedback about, the hard work she put in. The recipe tasted great. The photo though, we could maybe do some work on it. So what I did is I showed her photos of other examples of that type of recipe and I'm like, okay, what do you think about that one versus like yours? And she was able to see a difference. And she's like, wow, those are pretty spectacular. I'm like, yeah, they are. But you can do that too. So let's talk about like, tell me more about your lighting, your setup, et cetera, et cetera. So we had an open conversation, and round two, she nailed it. Oh my goodness. She gave me back these extra photos that were just out of the world, amazing, and I posted them. I got feedback from my peers online saying how amazing the photos were, and I share. I'm like, hey, this person loved your photos, et cetera, et cetera. And she's like, wow. And then every other recipe she did was just phenomenal, and they were outstanding. And so, the concern. We addressed it right away, and then the rest of the situation was great. So when we do talk about things, we can ideally make it better. And then using curiosity versus judgment. So once again, that's kind of like the coach approach, like remain curious, ask guiding questions instead of necessarily always giving answers. Ask the intern where are they coming from or what are they thinking, and just encouraging problem solving and supporting independence. And then once again, gotta go back to my dad. Professional and kind, professional and kind. So yeah, so just that those two words are just really valuable and important. And then be specific. Like we want to describe what we see, as I mentioned earlier, versus the emotional factor. And then breaking skills into smaller achievable steps. So sometimes like if like things aren't working out, maybe we need a little bit more step by step guidance in that sense of like, okay, like let's do A, B, C, D, because maybe for that particular intern, A to D is not necessarily there, and like kind of setting up, achievable outcomes. And then that also kind of like the increased structure and check-ins kind of goes into play too, where maybe we need a little more meetings here and there, or if you can do a coffee break or a lunch break more often concept, just to see where they're at and recognizing progress and the small wins and documenting concerns. Okay, so we don't actually have to look at that as a negative. Documentation actually can be considered a growth mindset too, like in the sense where when we document stuff for our patients or clients, like did that person lower their A1C, or did they reach their exercise goals if they wanted to work out twice a week or three times a week? Did they log it, monitor it? So keeping track of things can actually help people see progress and growth, and that can also be a positive thing. And then remember that it's all about collaboration. So you are not alone. We're here to help. We're here to manage these serious issues together. And we're here to support one another because, when it comes down to it, like many successful dietitians struggled during their supervised, but I did, during my internship, I had a lot of struggles and I had so much learning and growth happening, and it was great. And when handled well, all these difficult situations, they became pivotal learning experiences. And that's what we're here. We're here to grow and thrive. And, one thing before we end, I just kind of want to think about like, what do you hope your interns will say about you in 5 years? Like think about it. I'm still talking about Kelly and Jamie, and that was in 2008. That was almost 2 decades ago. Well, let's not do the math actually, because once again, ageless, timeless. Um, but you know what I'm saying? Like I still value the things that I learned. And so what will your interns say about you? Um, I I've been blessed to really have some amazing interns come my way. And, I've actually literally just 2 months ago, I had an intern who I haven't seen for almost 9 years. She contacted me going, Sarah, I wanted to call you because I knew you said you could always call if I ever had questions about negotiation. Because in my private practice, I do a lot of contract development and negotiation. And she's like, I'm applying for this job and I just want to make sure I negotiate correctly where I get my value, but I don't set myself out of the position by asking too much. So, and I'm like, I hear you. Like, you want to value your worth and but you don't want to, not get the job because of a price point. I get it. So we had a great conversation and she ended up getting the job. But I was also blown away that she contacted me so many years later. Like she still thought about me. So that was really it felt really good. And it was great to hear from her. And then, sometimes when we hear from our interns where they send you emails or text messages or whatever saying, I graduated or I just got my first job, that's always rewarding and exciting. So yeah, so when I intern, excuse me, when I precept, I should say, I do like to think about what will this intern say about me in 5 years? Like, how am I doing? So, yeah, so that's that. But I just wanted to let you know that you are all amazing, and thank you so much for even willing to be a preceptor. You're an inspiration already, and once again, we're here to we're mentoring is a brain to pick, an ear to listen, and to push in the right direction. So, thank you. And any questions? And then I don't have access to the chat, so I'm not sure if there was stuff in the chat. But also too, if you have questions, please ask away. But I also want to let you know that please use your phone and get the survey link and please answer the survey. And I believe that after answering the survey, that will also get you the CEU certificate post survey response. So yes, so please use your phone for that and take the survey link. So okay.
I have a
And then
question.
oh yeah.
Um, so I recently had an intern who had just a different model than I did for my internship. It was like future practice model, and it wasn't just like learn my job and do it. It was all these different kind of criteria that she experienced that she had to have. So I'm wondering, I don't know if that makes sense, but the difference between like the way my internship experience was about the same time as you, Sarah, versus um, the future practice model and what that looks like and maybe different programs and types of programs I get. Is that something you're familiar with and you can kind of speak to a little bit?
And so once again, is it Lindsay? I think I see your name.
Yes.
You and I are timeless. So yes.
Yes.
And yeah, and so yes, during our internship, it was more of like kind of like similar to the turbo in the sense of the competency factor, where you just have to check mark different boxes and
Mhm.
assignments. And then the future practice, like I know there's a few universities actually, yeah, University of the Pacific and a few other universities that do that. And so they don't necessarily they have they just word them differently, but they're very similar to competencies in the sense where they still have to fulfill these requirements, but they're just labeled differently. And they're also actually not labeled as interns. There's a different word for them too.
Yeah. It's
Um,
students of a different
yes.
kind. Yeah.
Yeah, but essentially it is the same. Or so with that in mind, when I work with those type of interns, I'll tell them what projects I would like to that I have on my table, and then I'll
Hmm.
ask them how these projects align with the requirements that they need to meet. So essentially, then they could kind of reiterate those competencies into, it's a different word, but it essentially is the same type of criteria and
Okay.
how it can work to meet with that. Yeah. But they're similar to the competencies. It's just a little bit, it's not necessarily like yeah, it's more of like meeting guidelines, it's not necessarily like a project. Like, okay, I did a handout on diabetes. It's more of like a guideline. Like I had a concept. Like I reached it's more conceptualized.
Yes. So you're saying that that's not necessarily the direction that all internships are going in. That's not necessarily the language that's changing for everyone.
Oh, no, like definitely
Okay.
some internships still do the classic competency like project concept. And then the newer one, it does have more of like a concepts versus projects, but the concepts can really relate to projects. So it's like, did I meet this area of understanding
I
through the
appreciate that.
project I did?
Okay.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Perfect. No other questions. I'm gonna put something in the chat box here, and it looks like we really appreciate you taking this survey. Um, just any feedback, we can get is appreciated. But once you complete the survey, I don't think it takes you to the CEU documentation. So I'm gonna attach the CEU documentation in the chat here, so you should all have that.
Oh, thanks, Jamie.
Yeah. Otherwise, if there aren't any other questions, I mean, I just thank everybody for attending today. And thank you, Sarah, for your time and just sharing your experiences. This was all amazing information. Like I was taking notes too, and you just condensed everything like so nicely. Um, but yeah, definitely meeting the intern where they are at. And as you shared, they all come in at different levels. So just kind of working with them and meeting frequently to, help towards, meeting those goals and meeting those competencies. Um, and I really like how you focus on building that relationship because that really is the foundation. Um, I think with working with interns, with working in any setting. So thank you so much. I really appreciate you chatting with everybody today.
Yeah, and just remember, I know it's not easy and I know it's a lot of work, but we really do appreciate it because I still value my experiences that I had and so we just want to say thank you to all preceptors
Yeah.
because we do know how much work it is and we
Mhm.
appreciate everything you do because you literally are helping the future of dietetics.
All right.